The following is a Bergen-Fischer media production.
Hey guys, you're listening to the In the Blood podcast. I am your host, AC Bergen-Fischer. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, whether you are new or returning listener. I'd like to invite you to consider what is being shared with an open mind and a receptive heart. Before we begin, though, the following disclaimer. I am a coach, not a therapist. Everything I share is opinion-based and from personal experience. If you require therapy, I'd be happy to help you explore your options. For those who would prefer coaching with me, that could be arranged via email at inthebloodpod@gmail.com. Finally, if you'd like to support this project for as little as $5, you can do so by visiting buymeacoffee.com/inthebloodpod.
We are the church. Ignore your logic and surrender your mind. We'll add your emotional and psychological distinctiveness to our own. You will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
Some of you already have a good idea of what is happening right now. For the rest of you, I should explain that today's introduction was presented in a Borg-like format. The Borg are a group of beings from the Star Trek universe who work together as a collective. They have artificial enhancements and share a single mind called the collective. Their main goal is to assimilate other species and technologies into their group to achieve what they believe is perfection. They forcefully modify individuals and civilizations and remove personal identity. The Borg are known for being relentless, with a vast number of ships and resources. When they say resistance is futile, that is meant to express that everyone must join them or face certain destruction. Kind of like the fundamentalist Christian idea of do things our way or burn in hell. As many of you know, I was a Christian for over 30 years. I didn't have a choice in joining that collective because I was assimilated at birth. In my mid-30s, I began the difficult process of liberating myself from that environment. That was one of the most profound and painful things I've ever gone through. In Star Trek, The Next Generation, Captain Jean-Luc Picard experienced a similarly profound reaction to being assimilated by the Borg and later liberated with the help of his friends. Today, I want to look at how his experience helped me to understand and appreciate my own. Picard's experience of being assimilated left him with deep emotional scars. He suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, manifesting as nightmares, flashbacks, and intense emotional stress. For me, it was very much the same kind of stuff. To try to explain how many emotional scars I carry as a result of all those years inside of fundamentalist Christianity would be overwhelmingly difficult. For many years, I struggled with nightmares of myself being judged, of burning in hell, that sort of thing. In the waking hours of the day, I carried no belief, no fear, no anxiety about many of these things, but in the quiet of the nighttime, when I drifted off to sleep and I let my mental guard down, that's when the overwhelming terror of a lifetime of brainwashing and indoctrination came washing over me. The flashbacks were brutal. I still struggle with that to this day, thinking about the person I used to be, the attitudes I used to carry, the judgment I used to cast on people who were just going about their lives. And the emotional distress, well, That's just sort of the ribbon that's tied around that whole package of the other things, putting things all together in one horrible little gift that just keeps on giving. After being assimilated, Picard struggled to reconcile his sense of self with the memories of being Locutus, the Borg spokesman. He grappled with feelings of shame, guilt, and loss of control over his own identity. That struggle with identity is just one more thing that it just hits me so hard. Because when I look back on my years inside of the church, I don't feel like that was a different person. I mean, I'm still me. I've always been me. But at the same time, if I think back on some of the things that I said, did, and thought, believed, it seems so abstract that that person could be at all related to the person who's talking to you right now. But at the same time, we are the same person. It's such a weird thing to try to figure out. And, you know, the shame and the guilt, those are things that, you know, when I talked to a dear friend recently, she had basically pointed out to me that, you know, you didn't do these things on purpose. You weren't evil. You were indoctrinated. And that just rings so true with, like, you know, thinking about Picard's experience with the loss of control over his own identity. I didn't choose to be a bigot. I didn't choose to be hateful or judgmental. I didn't choose to suspend my rational mind. I didn't choose any of that. I was taught the wrong things. I was taught to navigate in the wrong ways, and all of that was reinforced by a tightly knit community where everybody was of like mind. You know, just like being in the collective. Picard harbored significant anger and resentment towards the Borg for violating his autonomy and using him as a weapon against his own people. This anger fueled his determination to resist and combat the Borg whenever they posed a threat. The anger and resentment, those are powerful. And those are things I can totally relate to. When I think back on the things I was taught, the things I was expected to do while inside that cultish version of Christianity, I can't help but just get pissed off. There's just no other way about it. I resent my parents for introducing me into that, even though my logical mind understands that they didn't choose that for themselves. They were also assimilated at a young age and didn't really know any better. They just did what they were taught to do, which was to bring their children into the collective. But at the same time, my logical and rational mind doesn't enter into the equation because I'm just too upset to really appreciate where they were coming from sometimes. I didn't like what I was turned into. The memories of it, I still don't like that person. I wish I could erase him from existence, but I know that's not the way things work. So he's there and I'm forced to look back on him. But, you know, what that does to affect me in the here and now is it forces me to resist and combat the church whenever they pose a threat, whenever they stand up against equality, whenever they oppose women's rights, whenever they are against birth control, whenever they're trying to force their nonsensical beliefs on innocent children. I get very, very, very hostile, and I will do anything within my power to stop them at every turn. This is not a case of live and let live. This is a case of identifying an obvious threat and doing everything possible to neutralize that threat. Nobody spoke up for me. Nobody protected me. I will speak up and I will protect whenever I can. Over time, Picard embarked on a journey of emotional healing and self-discovery. He sought solace in his relationship with his crewmates, particularly his trusted friend and counselor, Deanna Troi, who helped him navigate these complex emotions. I've been on a similar journey of emotional healing and self-discovery. I have leaned into friends who don't always understand where I'm coming from, but sometimes they do. If nothing else, they serve as a reminder of how far I've come when I feel like maybe I'm just a big piece of garbage because I've done these things. These are the people that'll line up and say, you know what? You were a piece of garbage in that you did really terrible things and you thought terrible things and, but you're not that guy anymore. We've seen the progression. We've seen what you can do when you're willing to get honest with yourself. And it's that experience, maybe that anger, resentment, regret, PTSD, whatever it is, that fuels you to keep pushing forward so relentlessly. That negative experience that you hate has made you the man that you are today. And while I don't have an empathic friend and counselor like Deanna Troy to help me navigate my emotions, I have had years of therapy. And I feel like that's the next best thing to having a betazoid to help talk me through things. Despite the trauma that he endured, Picard demonstrated remarkable resilience and inner strength. He refused to let his past define him, and he worked really, really hard to reclaim his humanity, ultimately finding redemption through acts of courage, compassion, and leadership. Picard's reaction to being separated from the Borg reflects the profound psychological and emotional impact of assimilation, as well as his resilience in overcoming adversity and reclaiming his sense of self. Again, this reaction exactly mirrors the way I reacted to being separated from the church and the religion that lives there. While I remember every thought, every hang-up, every phobic, bigoted, hateful attitude I had, every fearful, ignorant reaction, it just doesn't feel like who I am now. It was me, though, even if I can't totally connect to it. Because I remember, because it was me, I carry the guilt that goes along with the things that that version of me thought, said, and did. Because I've already beaten myself up fairly recently on this podcast, I won't do that again today. What I will do is to explore the tools which were used to turn me into that inauthentic and ugly version of myself. I wasn't born that way, so obviously something happened. Again, someone recently told me that she and I weren't guilty. We were indoctrinated. And this is how I believe that was accomplished. Churches often present their beliefs as absolute truths. They discourage questioning or critical thinking. They use guilt-tripping tactics and fear of divine punishment to control behavior and force adherence to the church's teachings. Congregational norms and expectations can exert a significant amount of pressure on individuals to conform to the church's ideology. Peer pressure, effectively. Some churches promote the idea that theirs is the only true path to salvation, fostering a sense of superiority among members and alienating outsiders. The religious leaders are often presented as infallible authorities, making it difficult for followers to challenge their teachings. Churches may present a limited or biased view of scripture and history, omitting anything that contradicts their beliefs. encouraging members to limit their interactions with non-believers or dissenters can further entrench them in church's ideology. Exploiting emotional vulnerabilities, such as the desire for community, belonging, or purpose, can make individuals more susceptible to indoctrination. Repetitive rituals and ceremonies reinforce beliefs and create a sense of unity among the members. And finally, those who express doubts or question the teachings may face ostracism, shaming, or even being expelled from the community. Now, I don't want anyone to walk away feeling like my goal was to bash on anyone. I used to think that my parents put me through a terrible experience on purpose. Later, I realized that they were just doing what they were taught to do. So were the people who taught them, and so on and so on and so on. I guess I'm hoping for two things. One, that we can all see that cycles can be broken. And two, that after exploring all of these things out loud, I can finally put down the burden of guilt I've been carrying. We've all been taught things that turned out to be wrong. We've all done things that we would never think to do again. This week, my friends, I want to add to what I send you at the end of every chat by struggling to give myself what I so easily give to you, which is much love.